Welcome to Lunch with the Lord. I'm Pastor Mark. We're in Esther. We're going to be starting chapter 9 this lesson. But before we begin, Jeremiah 15:16, thy words were found, and I did eat them, and thy word was unto me the joy and the rejoicing of my heart. Now, in verses 1 to 16 of chapter 9, we see the Jews defend themselves. All right, the Jews now are defending themselves against this attack. Now, sometimes decisions that we make today will have effects long into the future. It is also true with an unsaved person. They may sow their wild oats, but when they get saved, the oats have been planted, and the time of reaping the effects of those oats comes after salvation, right? Sometimes people, they get into whatever, drugs, alcohol, whatever it is, and it takes a toll on their physical body. And then they come to Christ. And when they come to Christ, well, all is not healed. Sometimes the toll that was taken upon their physical body comes back to them after salvation. So we have to be careful. What we sow, we will reap. You know, God will allow us to reap it, and salvation does not nullify that. Though Haman is dead, yet the day of what he sowed against the Jews now has come. Sometimes God does not overrule the law of sowing and reaping, but instead God gives grace to go through it. You may have to reap some things that you sowed in your past, and God may not take that away, but he'll give you the strength and the grace to go through it with you. Now, verses 1 and 2 of chapter 9 says, now in the 12th month, that is the month Adar, on the 13th day of the same, when the king's commandment and his decree drew near to put in execution in the day of the enemies, that the enemies of the Jews hoped to have power over them, though it was turned to the contrary, that the Jews actually had rule over them that hated them. The Jews gathered themselves together in their cities throughout all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, to lay hand on such as sought their hurt, and no man could withstand, for the fear of them fell upon all people. Now, there were some that still had hope of being able to kill as many Jews as possible, and to take their possessions for their spoil. But the Jews banded together, and it seems that they went after those whom they already knew would be ready to fight them. So in a sense, I know it says that the king's decree through Mordecai was to stand and defend themselves, but more than likely, some of the Jews actually went out and got those who they knew were their enemies. They, in a sense, it sounds like they took the initiative to go after their enemies. Because the king was on the side of the Jews, probably many people didn't even bother fighting. And there were others who, well, they wouldn't have fought anyways, because maybe they had Jewish friends or Jewish neighbor they worked with. It was a half-hearted effort by the enemies because fear was affecting their hearts. Fear because of powerful friends that the Jews had in the king's palace, right? And fear because of the great God who stood with them. So were the Jewish people attacked? Yes. But was it a real heavy attack? Probably not. Verses 3 and 4 says, and all the rulers of the provinces, and the lieutenants, and the deputies, and the officers of the king helped the Jews, because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. For Mordecai was great in the king's house, and his fame went out throughout all the provinces. For this man, Mordecai, grew greater and greater. So it says here, they helped the Jews because of the fear of Mordecai, right? Well, of course they're going to help the Jews, right? Because why? Why would they help the Jews? Because it was politically safe, right? Whether they agreed with the Jews or not, that didn't matter. They were going to help the Jews anyways. Why? Because it was good for their political position in the kingdom. Verse 5, thus the Jews smote all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, and slaughter and destruction, and did what they would unto those that hated them. Right? So the Jews not only used swords, but also clubs and spears and other weapons. And those that hated them, right? Those that hated them, the Jews confined their actions only to those who were against them. The Jews confined their killings of their enemies only to their enemies. Now, verses 6 through 11, it says, and in Shushan, the palace, the Jews slew and destroyed 500 men. And then verses 7, 8, and 9 gives the names of Haman's 10 sons, right? Verse 10 says, the 10 sons of Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews, they slew. But on the spoil laid they not their hand. All right? And verse 11 says, on that day, the number of those that were slain in Shushan, the palace, was brought before the king. So these 500 men either hated the Jews on their own, or they were friends, right? Or they were friends and acquaintances of Haman, and they resented what happened to Haman. So either they hated the Jews or they were Haman's buddies, right? And so there was 500 people killed in Shushan. Haman's 10 sons were slain with a sword. But it is interesting that in the Hebrew Bible, the 10 names of Haman's sons, their 10 names are placed vertically. All right, they're placed vertically. This implies that they were hung one above the other on a very high gallows, according to the Jewish tradition. So there's something about that where in the Hebrew Bible, their names were written vertically, which seems to imply that they were hanged probably on Haman's gallows that he had made. They also did not take any of the spoil, so that they let the people know that they were not motivated by covetous reasons. Right? The Jewish people, whoever they killed to defend themselves, they just killed them, and they didn't take the spoil. They didn't want the other people in the provinces thinking that, they were out for selfish gain or anything like that. One commentator believes that the spoils, if they were not taken by the Jews, would immediately belong to the king. But if this is throughout all of the 127 provinces, then not only in Shushan is not known. Okay, so it's not known if the king, the people that were killed by the Jews, the things that they owned they did they become the possession of King Ahasuerus throughout all the 127 provinces, or did only the ones killed in Shushan, did their possessions become the king's property? We don't know. Okay, this would give the Jews more favor in the king's eyes, right? In a sense, well, the Jews are killing their enemies, and all of their enemies' properties becomes part of the king's possessions, right? He begins to own these things. And verse 12 says, "And the king said unto Esther the queen, The Jews have slain and destroyed 500 men in Shushan the palace, and the 10 sons of Haman, what have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now what is your petition? And it shall be granted thee. And what is your request further? And it shall be done." The king now gives Esther the opportunity to ask for more on the Jews' behalf, okay, if she's not satisfied. So the king here gives her another opportunity to see what she decides, whether the Jews need more protection or not. All right. And then verses 13 and 14, it says, "Then said Esther, If it please the king, let it be granted to the Jews which are in Shushan to do tomorrow also according unto this day's decree, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged upon the gallows. And the king commanded it so to be done. And the decree was given at Shushan, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons. For the Jews that were in Shushan gathered themselves together on the 14th day also of the month Adar, and slew 300 men at Shushan, and on the prey they laid not their hands." All right, so just in case any of the Jews' enemy were in hiding on that day, or that they left the battle to retreat and to hide, Esther asks for one more day to deal with all those who were against the Jews. So in a sense, this is like, in a sense, the hand of God, where some of them might have said, well, we're outnumbered today, we'll get them tomorrow. Well, Esther gives them one more day to defend themselves and to go after their enemies. They would come out of hiding thinking the worst was all over, right? And that they would be safe at home. And that they would be safe at home on the next day, right? And would not know of the king's special decree made by Esther. So if any of the Jews' enemies did go in hiding, and were hiding out at a cousin's house, right, or a grandma's house or something like that, and they didn't hear the king's decree, they'd go back home. And they wouldn't know of the second decree, and the Jews would have the opportunity to go and search them out and kill them as their enemy. And Haman's sons, which were slain, she wants them to be impaled or crucified for all to see, to instill fear to those who would presume to repeat Haman's actions. So Esther wants them not just killed, they were killed by the sword. But Esther says, yeah, that's not enough. I want you to hang them up, hang them up, put them on the gallows. We want them out where people can see, so that when people walk by and people see them, those 10 sons hanging there, they're gonna think twice about doing what Haman did. Not one of Haman's sons turns from carrying out their father's desire. If Haman would have humbled himself and repented, maybe all of his sons would have been spared. Haman trained up his children in godless ways, and it cost them their lives here and for all of eternity. They continued their father's hatred, especially when everything that their father owned was given to Esther and Mordecai. It must have irked them, right? That all of their father's possessions were given over to their father's enemy, right? To Mordecai and to Esther. So instead of them repenting, they continue their father's wish to kill the Jews. So they go out and they participate, and it costs them their lives. And then in verses 15 and 16, on the next day after, the Jews in Shushan kill 300 more people, while the Jews in the rest of the provinces stood and were ready against an attack, okay, if it came. So the Jews in Shushan had one more day extra to kill their enemies. And the Jews in the rest of the province basically stood and was defending themselves on the second day, ready to defend if they needed to. All right. And then it says here in verse 16, verse 16 says that there were 70 and 5,000, right? 70 and 5,000. Now, the Septuagint has only 15,000. In the Septuagint, it only says 15,000. And a number of commentators think that this is the more accurate number. So, although King James Version says 75,000, the Septuagint says it's only 15,000. Commentators think that 15 is more accurate, the more realistic number of what actually took place. All right, we're going to start verse 17 with the Feast of Purim next lesson. But until then, walk with the Lord. I know He walks with you.